Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire. And when I'm not interviewing inspiring entrepreneurs, I'm listening to Stephanie O'Brien on the Moved by Purpose podcast.
Success is actually the journey along the way. Success is not necessarily at the end goal. It's not at the finish line. It's the process along the way. And so there's value in building these processes, because that's where life happens, is in the process, is in the system. And when we're building this stuff, life is happening right there. We're not building this stuff so that we can go live life later on.
Are you longing to know what your purpose is? Are you on the wrong career path? Do you feel like there must be more to life? Don't worry, there's hope. It's time to be moved by purpose. Now your host, Stephanie O'Brien.
Hey, it is Stephanie O'Brien, and welcome to the Moved by Purpose podcast. I'm excited that you're here with me again, joining me on Monday, most likely on your commute home from work. I'm hoping you had a beautiful Monday, if Monday is the day that you choose to listen to this show. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I ideally post all podcasts on Monday at 1 o'clock. So hopefully you know that, and whether or not you listen to it on Monday, I want you to know that I am here. Now, I have not always followed that. There's been, life happens, right? Technical glitches happen, things just go wrong, and anyway, but more times than not, I am here for you every single Monday. And today's guest is Scott Beebe. He owns the Purpose Group, LLC. Scott, Ashley, and his 3 children live in Bluffton, South Carolina, just outside of Hilton Head, where Scott founded and leads the Purpose Group, doing business under the trade name Business on Purpose, a business coaching, training, and strategy group that works to help small business owners and organizational leaders to uncover what they cannot see in 3 primary ways. First, development and implementation of organizational vision, mission, and values. Systematizing and automating business systems so owners can work on their business and less time in their business. And 3, leads virtual Business on Purpose mastermind groups where business owners and organizational leaders meet weekly to uncover and implement the things they cannot see. So without further delay, I'll get right into the interview. Welcome to the show, Scott. It is so exciting to have you on today.
Stephanie, I am thrilled that we could get this together. We've got Moved by Purpose and Business on Purpose. We've just got purpose all around.
I know, and this is going to be a great conversation. And this is my most exciting question to ask and to hear the answer from. And I would love for you to take us back to what started or ignited you to do what you do today. What were the events or things happening in your life that led you to start Business on Purpose?
You know, a mutual friend, Stephanie, Dan Miller, always talks about how when he went to do a workshop one time, he told the guy the price of the workshop. You know, it's like $3,000 for a 3-hour workshop. And he said, I'm paying you $3,000 for 3 hours. And Dan said, no, you're not paying me $3,000 for 3 hours. You're paying me $3,000 for 30 years of experience that lead up to these 3 hours. And that's kind of how I like to look at background very briefly. Went to college at the University of South Carolina, ended up going to theology school for grad school after that, and got a Master's of Divinity. I thought it would make me feel like holier. It didn't, by the way. I learned a lot. And then for the last 16 years after I graduated from theology school, I've spent half of that time in what I would call kind of megacorp for-profit businesses, and I've spent the other half of that time in very, very small non-for-profit entities, either working globally in West Africa and also in churches. I've actually planted and pastored a church. And so I've seen really a lot of angles, And then what happened was the last couple of years, I had the privilege of being able to oversee a small non-governmental organization that worked in West Africa. And we had a really horrible internal situation that happened at the board level, and the rest of us were all just caught up in it. And February 27th of 2015, Stephanie, I got on a plane out of Dallas, Texas, coming home to the beautiful East Coast just outside of Hilton Head, South Carolina. And I had to walk into my house, look at my gorgeous, lovely wife at that time of 16 years, now of 17 years, and our 3 children, and basically tell them, Dad doesn't have a job anymore. And that's never happened to me. And it was a situation that was largely out of my control. And so I ended up, through a series of events over the next week or so, I had some dear friends here where I live who were business owners. They needed what I was really good at offering. In fact, we had spent a lot of time together before that happened. And I called them both up and said, guys, I'm in business. Here's the name of my business. I had actually already launched the Business on Purpose podcast because I wanted to learn from business owners who were integrating in their work. And so that name stuck. We turned that into the business. And now we're here doing one-on-one business coaching, mastermind groups, and also about to get into online products, but primarily around helping people articulate their vision, their mission, their core value set, and then doing the hard work of actually systematizing and processing out their business. And so that's some of the events that kind of led up to where we're at today.
Wow. And, we were talking a little bit before the official recording of this, and I want to really focus this interview on the power of systems and processes, which, to some listeners may really geek them out that we're going to talk about this, and to others they might, be like, oh gosh, this sounds boring. So before you hit pause or decide to change your mind on this, listen in on this, because I'm one of those people that would be like, that sounds boring. Systems and processes is so not exciting. I want to learn more about the exciting things, like meeting people and
yes.
all of that. But I have learned because my wiring is, I'm that ID personality in DISC. For those of you who have been following me for a while, I'm a big fan of DISC. And that ID personality is the high I's are just very spontaneous, free spirits, go by the seat of their pants. And then the D is like the driver, the one who's like decisive and quick. So impulsive is a great one word to describe who I am and what I do. Systems and processes like that, it just sounds like that's going to take too much time to learn. But I've learned that through a lot of pain of things falling apart and crumbling, or doing all of this activity, but not having a foundation of a system and process in place, that it cannot bear any weight, and it crumbles. So I've had to slow down and put a system in place, and it's been the most amazing thing. It takes time to learn at first and put some structure and order in place, but then once you do it, it's there.
Yeah.
And you just keep working in it. So it's really not as time consuming as not having one at all. So I know I didn't really ask you a question, but I'm sure you can, if you have any experience with what the nightmare could be.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And you're absolutely preaching my language, both in the systems and processes and also in the DISC. In fact, as we're talking right now, part of the reason the audio quality is so bad is because I'm actually having to do this away from my normal podcast setup, and I'm actually in a client's conference room right now, and I'm looking at the wall. And about 6 months ago, we did a DISC workshop. It's actually a conference room that's shared between 2 businesses, and I'm looking at 2 different companies' DISC profiles. And Stephanie, you nailed it dead on with the ID, the DI. It's interesting. Most business owners that I've dealt with are either DIs or DCs, but their dominant is usually a D. In fact, I usually call Ds business owners, where the Is we typically call those salespeople, the Cs we typically call bookkeepers, and the S's we typically call friends, because they're the ones that keep everybody together. And so I'm looking at this wall, hearing the discussion around DISC that you're talking about. And listen, that's one of the things I would like to highlight for anybody listening is profiling and objective profiling. It needs to be a top priority, because the latest numbers that are coming out is that for every employee that you have, for you business owners that earn about $40,000 a year, when that employee turns over, they leave, you have to let them go for whatever reason, the latest statistics are it's going to cost the business around $16,000 with that one turnover. If you've got an $80,000 a year employee, this is really startling. The latest numbers are around $150,000 it's going to cost the business if you lose that employee in turnover cost. And so understanding the profile stuff is so crucial. But then, Stephanie, once you get them in the door, I don't know if you've ever hired anybody, but when you hire somebody, inevitably what happens in the world of the business owner is you wake up the first day that new hire comes in and you go, oh my goodness, what am I going to tell them? Like, what am I going to teach them? How am I going to train them? And so that's where we go back into the systems and the processes. And we actually follow a pretty clear structure on how we get there. First, we've got to articulate their vision, mission, values. I don't care what kind of system you've got. If you have no roadmap for where ultimately you want to go, the system's kind of pointless. You know, you could have a Ferrari and you get in and eventually it's going to run out of gas. And so you got to know where you're going. So we articulate vision, mission, values. Then what we do is create the actual roadmaps to get to the destination. And so we do that by articulating and defining what systems are in the business today. Very, very important. You know, Stephanie, the human body has got 11 systems in it. And every business is an organism. And we need to identify how many systems are in the organism of that business. Just like doctors have identified how many systems are in the human body. And then we can determine health or disease within each system. And that's really where the processes come in.
Yeah. And is there any tips for where to start? Let's say somebody is, you know, they're a one-man show, so maybe they don't have they might have like a part-time or a couple people helping them out. And I know you probably work with a little bit bigger businesses, but if there's someone listening that is like, they have their business, they've been at it for a while, but they really only have like a couple support staff or a support team, how could they begin to have a little bit more structure and order in their business? And how do you think that would help them grow? Because I found that not having structure and organization like really prevented the growth of my business.
Yeah. And by the way, you just articulated my business. I'm a small business. It is in my vision that I will never have a W-2'd employee. Mm-hmm. I've actually got in my 6-year vision, I want to have 6 virtual assistants. And right now, we have 2, and we're about to add a 3rd. We're actually bringing on an online product creation coach, and that's going to help us get some of our tools that we develop in the lab with one-on-one clients, actually get those in the hands digitally for lots of different people. And so I'm a small business. I work predominantly with businesses under 25 employees. And so anywhere I work with one business that has 1 person in it, and I work with another business that has 42 people in it. It just happens to kind of go outside of my range a little bit. But the point is, and what I've found is it's pretty much the same. And let me break it down into 4 primary steps. And I've even got a tool online that people can get started. It's real easy. It's totally free. And the first step, and I'll go back to it, and I really want to ring this bell, Stephanie, and that is articulate the vision story, not a statement, a story, and I'll explain that. Your mission statement, that's a memorizable phrase that you and your team can take with you. And then your core value set. So the vision story, the difference between that and a vision statement is, Stephanie, have you ever been to Hilton Head, South Carolina?
I have. It's beautiful.
Okay. So imagine you had never been to Hilton Head, South Carolina. It's actually good that you've seen it. And I were to tell you, hey, Stephanie, we're going to go on a road trip and we're going to Hilton Head. You would look at me and go, okay. I mean, never heard about it. Never heard of it. Don't know anything about it. That's a vision statement. Hey, we're going to Hilton Head. A vision story is, hey, Stephanie, we're going to go to this beautiful sea island off the coast of South Carolina that's shaped like a shoe. It's got a north end and a south end. It's got live oak, 200-year-old live oak trees, beautiful beaches on its east coast. It's got an incredible inlet bay on its west coast. It's got oyster beds, and it's got a brand new outdoor shopping center. And, I go through all the details. That's a vision story, because now all of a sudden I've given you a visual image of what the destination looks like. And so that's where I really encourage and coach the business owner to say, all right, let's take a page or 2 pages and let's ask some key questions. What were dreams of yours as a kid? what are things from a revenue standpoint that you want to see happen in the next 5 to 8 years? And so we just ask key questions. And out of that, I ask the business owner to spend about a half an hour to 45 minutes and just write. Even the ones that hate to write, just write. Write about employees. How many employees do you see? What kind of product offering do you see? What's the revenue numbers look like? What is geographical footprint? All of those things, let's write that down. Because there's an old Jewish saying in Habakkuk 2 where God tells Habakkuk, write the vision down so that those who read it may run. And so if we don't have that written down, let's not get frustrated as business owners when the people we bring on the team with us don't run after it because we've not done our job in writing it down. And so that's really where the vision and then the mission statement is a kind of a reduction of that. In a statement, I require 15 words or less so you can memorize it. And then your core values, those are your guardrails all along the road to your destination. And so you can jump those guardrails if you want to. And if you're on dry land, it'll screw up your car a little bit. But if you're jumping the guardrails and you're on the bridge to Hilton Head, you're going to die. And that's not a good place to be. And so that's why I always start with that first step. Articulate your vision story, your mission statement, and your core value set. So let me check in there, Stephanie. Is that clear?
Yes. And I love that you clarify the difference between vision story and vision statement. Because the vision story is far more exciting and compelling. Like when you describe, it's like, oh, I'm going to Hilton Head.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it. And what do I need to do to support you in helping us get there successfully?
Yeah, because I want to be there. And you know what, Scott? You're good at driving. What I'm really good at is navigating. And so use my skills in navigation. We'll use your love and skill of driving, and we'll get there along the way. Hey, by the way, where are we going? And then you detail that out. Next thing you know, you've got people who really want to go. So the second step is what I call the roadmap stage. And this stage it can be a little bit more challenging, but it's really meant to be simple. Because usually what happens, Stephanie, is we write out our vision, missions, and value statement. And a lot of people that have been in big companies have done this before. They've spent the thousands to hire consultants and do all this. And then it goes in a nice little book and sits on the shelf. And so the first roadmap out of a series of 3 roadmaps we build is what I call the implementation map. This is the map that's going to tell us how to implement the vision story, the mission statement, and the core value set. It's going to walk us through the different ways, the different media channels we're going to put this stuff on. You know, social media, we're going to do it once a week. And so we look at it from kind of a SMART perspective: specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, irrelevant, and then it's time-bound. The second roadmap we build is what's called a one-page systems map. And that's where we actually articulate and rank the existing systems in the business. Because, Stephanie, most business owners have never articulated that out. They know that they do accounting, but they've never said, we have an accounting system in this business. And so we actually articulate that out, and then we rank them. Because what that allows us to do is it tells us what system we need to work on first. So we diagnose the existing systems. The third roadmap in that second roadmap stage is what I call the delegation tool. And I've actually created a tool called the What Could You Delegate tool. I'm really bad at naming stuff, by the way. And so we just call it the What Could You Delegate tool. And it takes the business owner through exactly what they need to offload and how they're going to be able to do it. So that's the second stage, and I call that the roadmap stage.
Wow. And you have 4 of these steps.
All right.
Right? So articulate the vision, the roadmap stage, and then what's the third?
Third stage is organizational infrastructure. So we start to build the framework of the business from the ground up. Even though the business is already going, we want to take that newfound and articulated vision story, and now we want to build the business around that vision story. We don't want to build the business the way it was originally built, around just kind of haphazard explosion, just kind of this goop that worked together. We now want to be very defined in how we do this. And so we create the organizational structure. Now, I don't want to lose people here because I'm going to use some cliche terms, but I don't know how else to say them. And so what we do first is we actually rebuild the organizational structure, or the org chart, the old school org chart. We build it around the new vision story. And so we write out the roles in every single role that's in the business. So like, for instance, right now, I have an owner's role, I have a president's role, I have an admin role, an operations role, a sales role, and a marketing role. So those 4 that I mentioned last, those are the 4 different systems in my business. Well, guess who's the head of each one of those roles right now? It's me.
Right.
And so, but I'm in each seat.
Okay. Which, it's amazing. And, I think that for me, it was just so, in the beginning, I'm like, oh, I did hit a point of burnout because I'm like, I am wearing so many hats. And I don't even know, again, because I was lacking a process and structure and not organized that well. I'm like, I need to get a lot more clear on my role and how I'm going to operate and function in each role, and know when to delegate and know when enough is enough, like when my skill set is ended and need to hire somebody else. Because as a solopreneur, as you know, it can be really challenging in the beginning, especially if you go from employee to now working for yourself. Mm-hmm. For me, it was a huge, huge shocker to see, you know, entrepreneurship is so glamorized and there is so many huge benefits and blessings to it. I didn't have a supervisory role in my job that I left, and that was really my first job out of college. Mm-hmm. So to have to learn to delegate, I mean, I was used to honestly, like, this is my job description and this is my box and this is what I do. Mm-hmm. And then there's somebody else set up and in place to do that part. Mm-hmm. And then I had to learn, like, oh no, this, yeah. When you work for yourself, you don't really, I mean, in the beginning, you don't have a box.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so it's interesting because regardless of your experience, you know, it's interesting too, Stephanie, because you and I share a faith background. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about stewardship in our faith tradition and our faith background from a Christian and a Jesus perspective. And when I look at systematizing and processing a business, to me, it really is an issue of stewardship and how you're going to steward this organism that God has entrusted to you. And so there is order in the world. God created order in the world. He did it in a very orderly way, actually. So we have sunrises and sunsets. We have a flow. We live here on the coast. We have tides. The tide comes in about every 6 to 6.5 hours and it goes out. And guess what? That tide never really gets over a certain height, never goes below a certain depth. And so we live in a world of systems and processes. We don't want to lose the humanity in that, so that's important. But we can create the framework so that the humanity can thrive. And that's really where humanity begins to thrive, is within a framework of structure. And so that organizational infrastructure step is so crucial because you rebuild the organization from the ground up, but then we bring in, and this is one of my most favorite things, again, eye roll, you can trigger the eye roll here, but it's the good old-fashioned team meeting. Because you think, well, how do we embed training? How do we embed accountability? How do we embed implementing the vision, mission, values? It's all in one mechanism or one vehicle, and that is the good old-fashioned weekly meeting. So let me explain. When you go to a hospital, I mean, you just had the flu. Fortunately, I don't think you were in the hospital, but you were sick. You felt like trash.
Right.
If you would have gone to the hospital, the first thing they would have done likely, because you'd have most likely been dehydrated, they would have given you an IV. Well, with the IV in your arm, if you needed some pain relief, they would have put ibuprofen, but instead of giving it to you orally, they would have just pushed it through the IV bag. Well, then if you needed an antibiotic, okay, well, we'll just push it through the IV bag. So the IV bag becomes the vehicle or the conduit for everything outside that needs to come inside. That's what the weekly team meeting is. It's the IV bag for the organization. So we need to bring vision, mission, values into the organization. Do it through the weekly team meeting. We need to bring encouragement into the organization. Do it through the weekly team meeting. We need to bring action items and accountability, training and development. Do all of that in the weekly team meeting. Limit that meeting to an hour. Make it highly agended with an action item sheets that are all up on Google Drive, so they're all public for everybody to see it. And then when you come back to your weekly meeting next week, you just revisit your agenda, revisit your action items, go through any training thing that you need from your process, and everything's done right there. And oh, by the way, leave the cell phones outside. And so when you can get to that weekly meeting that's aligned directly with your organizational structure, and you got all of that from your vision, now you're ready to build out and go into the fourth stage, which is the processing stage. This is the longest, hardest stage of the entire process, because that's when you go line item by line item. You build out the job roles from your organizational chart. So, for instance, you've got a head of sales. Well, let's build out that role. Well, when you build out that role, every line item, Stephanie, now becomes a process. And so what you do is you just go right out the process. You know, for instance, so you're in the sales role. Well, one of the things in the sales role is going to be lead conversion. Well, within lead conversion, you've got, a follow-up phone call. Well, guess what? That follow-up phone call is a process. You follow up phone call 3 days post whatever, and this is what you say, and this is where you lead them. Well, we need to write all of that out. Because if Stephanie decides to have the flu for 6 months and we need somebody else to come in and be our salesperson, now we don't have to worry about bothering Stephanie. She's already trained us through a written process that, oh, by the way, has been linked to her job role, which is linked to the organizational structure, all within Google Drive or whatever platform. So everything's right there. It's all at a click of a button.
Yes. I mean, this is so key, especially because, like, you know, my business model is very similar to yours. I don't have employees. I have contracted support. So my VA is a freelancer and works for herself. Like, I had one of my VAs go on maternity leave. So because I had something in writing and learned, I'm just so, that's one thing I'm grateful. I will give God that credit because I'm not that smart. That's not my natural wiring, that I just had enough like sense to be like, you know what, I should probably write this all out as I develop and as we're learning, because if something ever goes wrong, if they end up leaving or whatever happens, I need somebody else to come in, look at all of this, and be able to know what to do. Yeah. I mean, of course, there's a learning curve and some training, you know, that adjustment, but it's not like I have to start from scratch and do everything all over again.
That's right.
And
that's right.
so it was the most amazing. I'm like, I am just, thank God.
Which then goes, Stephanie, back to being a steward of your time. I mean, time is not scalable. It's finite. It's all those things we've heard, right? The cliches. But the reality is when you're in the type of business that you and I are in, you actually come to realize, wait, the cliche is a cliche for a reason. It's true. My time is not scalable. And so I've got to figure out how to, I've just got to figure out how to steward the time well so that I can serve the people that I've been intended to serve with the skill set, or what I call the narrow brilliance that God's given me. And in order to do that, I've got to do some homework and some pre-work. But if you can here's what I tell people a lot. If you can give me an hour, I will buy you back an hour. But the difference is my hour will be every week that I buy you back. And so I've bought you back an hour in what a couple of people call perpetuity, forever. If you can just give me an hour one time, I'll give you likely either half an hour, an hour in perpetuity.
Yep. And you know, speaking of stewardship, like that's just been something I just have been starting in like November. I just got this really strong urge to really get it together, I guess, like, for lack of a better phrase, and be like, all right, it's time to like step up my game, quit making excuses, quit whining about how not fun it is, and shut up and do it, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's been one of the best things. Honestly, it feels empowering. It feels free. I think, like, I resisted it because I'm like, it doesn't feel that free. Like, I want to be able to create and, and not be restricted. But, you know, because of that structure, I have more freedom.
That's exactly right.
It's kind of those odd, you know, like, okay, fitness goals, like that's one of my things. It's like work out 5 days a week and be really diligent about what I'm eating, track what I'm eating. That does not sound fun, but you know what? I lost 10 pounds in a month. Like, I mean, most of that was water weight, but still, like, it's just that gets you the results. That's what gets you the results is stewarding and being wise, and it may not always be fun and glamorous, but it works and it helps you increase impact, income, influence, all of it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And again, the reason that the majority of business owners don't do this is because it is hard. It is very, very hard. And I remember a couple of years ago when that workout pack, P90X, came out, their big sales pitch was, this is not easy. It's hard. It's going to take you an hour. You're going to sweat like a dog, and you're going to look great when you're done. And they sold the dog snot out of that package because I think inherently, we know things aren't easy. We know that if we put in a minute, we're not going to get $1 million, you know, unless you're lottery. And then, you know, the history of that, people's lives falling apart, is just, you know, I don't think it's a place you want to be. And so we know that inherently. We know inherently things are, you know, that require diligency. and hard work and thoughtfulness and wisdom and all those things. And so I think when people finally sit down, and that's why I'm just honest with people to say, this is not fun. It's not the sexiest hour of your day when I show up. It's hard. Yeah. It's sweaty. And when I leave, you're not going to be happy. But in 6 months, when the margin starts creeping in fact, one of the biggest problems I'm seeing now, Stephanie, it's an exciting problem to see, is the business owners that I'm working with are actually seeing a margin of time, but they're really struggling because with that margin of time, they're wanting to backfill it with just garbage, with, surfing Facebook or whatever, instead of intentionally using that time to do something impactful and great. And so I had a business owner look at me dead in the face about a month and a half ago and say, Scott, we've done all this stuff. I've got the vision for the business. They've done incredible with it. He said, I don't know what my purpose is, and I need you to help me find my purpose.
Oh, that's amazing.
Just straight out. And I was like, you got to be, this is unbelievable. Like, I never saw this coming. Yeah. But the reality is that when you process out your business, you create the destination, you write the vision down so that those who read it may run. It works. Like, it actually works. And now you got to figure out, the next challenge is to figure out what to do with the margin.
Yes. And you know what? Just to add to that, I love that Habakkuk verse. Huge, for the vision, put it before you, write it down. I even do it's kind of funny. My dream is to be a New York Times bestseller, and I believe I will be when that happens. Mm-hmm. But I have a mock-up book cover that says that, my name, and I put that in front of me, and it just, honestly, seeing that, it's like, okay, I got to write today.
Wow.
And it's just it inspires you to see that. So in addition to the written, sometimes the images or something can really help you. But in addition to that, there's the other half of that, which is for the vision is for an appointed time. Mm-hmm. So for those of you listening that might have done this and you're seeing results, but maybe not as fast or as big or extravagant as you had hoped to see at this point, if you stay faithful to it and keep doing it, keep the vision before you, keep revisiting. If you need to pivot, it does take time. Mm-hmm. It takes time.
It does take time and a lot of sweat and a lot of work. And, that's where I come back, and I interviewed a guy for my podcast a couple of months ago, Chris Samples. His site is The Journey of Success. And his whole point is success is actually the journey along the way. Success is not necessarily at the end goal. It's not at the finish line. It's the process along the way. And so there's value in building these processes because that's where life happens, is in the process, is in the system. And when we're building this stuff, life is happening right there. We're not building this stuff so that we can go live life later on. And I would even kind of put a Seth Godin spin on what you said too, Stephanie, when you said, I've got a mock-up book cover of me being a New York Times bestseller. I think what Seth Godin would say is, we need you to be a New York Times bestseller because there are those of us who are waiting for what you have to say. And without you becoming a New York Times bestseller, I never hear your message. And that's not true for all of us. I'm hearing your message now, but there are a lot of people who will never hear your message. And so to put that bit on it, we need you to do that work because if you don't, then we're not going to hear the message that God's given you for me.
Very powerful, very powerful. And it's such a great reminder because the journey isn't easy. My book, honestly, the book I'm writing, it's all about, and some people, one guy, when I was telling him about the message, it's inspired by the rebuilding of the Wall of Jerusalem. Nehemiah's journey, there was nothing in it that looks easy about it. Yeah. He had resistance every step of the way. And even after the accomplishment, there were a whole new set of problems. Yep. I'm like, okay, so this is what my story is about. And he's like, yeah, but people don't want to hear that. He's like, they want to be sold that it's going to be great and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, it is going to be great. And there is going to be a blessing. And there's going to be joy in the journey if they choose to have it. But I'm also not going to say once you find your purpose, life is going to be smooth sailing for you. Mm-hmm. So, as it just now, I want to transition to my next question, which is, what is one resource that you can't live without?
Google Drive right now, and if we're talking about a technological resource, it's Google Drive without hesitation. I couldn't live without.
Yep.
In terms of just overall investment in who I am and what I do, I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but my reading God's Word on a regular basis and a steady diet, and the way that I do that is I just go download a 1-year reading plan. I mean, it's nothing spectacular, there's no fireworks, and I just run through it. So that would be the kind of the overall resource, that the investment in myself, my family, everything around me, a technological, without question right now, would be Google Drive and leveraging that.
Awesome. And in addition to the Bible, is there another book that you've read that has really kind of transformed the way you think and changed direction of your life?
I'll give you two. One is going to be kind of very theological. The other one's it's not going to sound theological, although there's a ton of overtones, not in how even the author intended to write it, but just by God, how God created this world. So the first one is called The Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard, who has passed away a couple years ago. It is a reference book for life for me. He gives you the Sermon on the Mount in a completely different angle. It's literally a reference book for me. And so that's one I would recommend. The second is one I found actually this past year by an author named Atul Gawande, and it's called The Checklist Manifesto. For all you said we're going to geek out. So for all of you who are geeking out on the systems and process thing, go read The Checklist Manifesto, and you will find out where checklists came from. And it is a fascinating read.
Wow. And who was the author of that again?
It's Atul, A-T-U-L, and the surname is Gawande, G-U-W-U-N-D, something like that. But if you just Google Checklist Manifesto, it'll pop up on Amazon.
Nice. Okay, and how can people connect with you?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. First is if you just go to mybusinessonpurpose.com, that's our primary platform. And we post our podcast up on there, and maybe even Stephanie, one day you'd be so kind to grant us an interview of you. But we've got the Business on Purpose podcast there. And then we always have giveaways. Right now at the time of this recording, we've got our 2016 Strategic Planning Workbook, the same workbook that I use to do our business strategic planning for 16. You can use that. It's completely free, total access to you. And then the other place that I'll send you is the 4 steps to businessfreedom.com. So those 4 steps we talked about. If you just go to the 4 steps to businessfreedom.com, and then I've always got giveaways and offers up there. In fact, I think right now I'm offering a 30-minute free coaching call, and that kind of goes on and off. And so you can check that out there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. It was a pleasure getting to know you better and having your expertise be shared so generously with the Move by Purpose audience. It is valued. I took great notes. I know this will really help set people up for greater freedom and productivity.
Well, Stephanie, thank you. And I'll speak for your entire audience and go back to what we said earlier, is we're waiting on you to be the New York Times best-selling author. So get back to work.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. So we live in a world of systems and processes, but we can create the framework so that the humanity can thrive. And that's really where humanity begins to thrive, is within a framework. Organizational infrastructure step is so crucial because you rebuild the organization from the ground up. It's the good old-fashioned team meeting. How do we embed accountability? How do we embed implementing the vision, mission, values?
Okay, so there you have it. That was Scott Beebe, and he just really threw so much valuable information at us, and the 4 primary steps were really amazing, and I love how he took us through that. I love how to articulate the vision story versus vision statement, the power of writing down your vision so that people can run towards it and help you accomplish it is really key. It's kind of the same concept of writing down your goals. There's power in writing things down and then keeping it before you. So visual aids, reviewing frequently what you've written down, writing it in a compelling story is exciting rather than just kind of a plain statement. So I really valued this interview and Scott's time, and trust that you found value in it too. And if you've been with me for a while, make sure that you check out movedbypurpose.net, join the mailing list where you will get exclusive content, exclusive deals and discounts, first-time access, and tons of freebies from me just for joining the list. Things that are not given to anybody else but those on the email list. Plus, you guys have priority access to me, to all programs, questions get answered, and you get lots of freebie resources when you make yourself known and reach out. So anyway, have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you all next week.